It's September 1st, 2003, and we're in my house on Old Montauk Highway, 654 Old Montauk Highway, and in Montauk, and we're looking over the ocean. It's a gray day, but it's very beautiful out there. Montauk is always beautiful to me. I first came here on a very special day. It was 1942, the 4th of July weekend, and it certainly was an important day for me. I came with my future husband. I didn't know then that he was going to be my husband. We didn't get married for 4 more years, but I came with my twin sister and my future husband, and we arrived in Montauk to visit Second House, which is your wonderful historic building here. And my husband's, Jimmy I'll call him, Jimmy's sister was married to David Kennedy, and so we were guests in the house quite often. But to arrive in Montauk on a foggy, mysterious evening on probably the 3rd of July, and it was a night more or less like we've had all during July, swirling fog, and I could see windmills along the way, and I thought I was in another country. It seemed like Scotland, the moors, and I just was so taken with Montauk from the very first moment. And I was born in Brooklyn and lived there a few years, but my father had died in the flu epidemic when my sister and I were 5 months old. So my mother moved to Connecticut, and we grew up there. But at a certain point, she decided that we wanted to go to art school. So she said we could go to Pratt. So we went to Pratt for 4 years, but we moved back to Brooklyn. And as soon as we left Pratt, Franny and I, we both got jobs in photography. Not great jobs. I mean, sometimes I was just ironing clothes in a studio. But I did get a wonderful job for a woman photographer who worked for Vogue. Her name was Toni Purcell. And I started working for her 1 week before Pearl Harbor. So that was a fairly exciting period. And then that same year, I met Jimmy. And then the following fall, my sister, who had been working in another studio situation, was invited to join the staff of Vogue magazine. And she worked for Vogue and Glamour and House and Garden under contract for 20 years. So we both had long photography careers, because I left, when Franny went into Vogue's studio, as a twin, you want your twin to get ahead, but you can't be that far away in rank from her. So when I was the assistant and she was a full photographer, I decided to leave Toni. So I just branched out on my own. And I was freelance, and then kind of moved into my husband's studio, and that was it. So we arrived at Montauk in any case. And Second House was the most wonderful building. It was a building that I always liked, old buildings and antiques, and so did Jimmy. We matched perfectly on all that. We loved houses and buildings and vistas. But Second House, I think, was built in 1797. And the Kennedy's family, Mrs. Kennedy and Mr. Kennedy Sr., bought Second House in 1910. They had been boarding there with the former owners, Alicia and Nellie Payne. And at a certain point, they decided they would buy it. And so they owned it from 1910 to 1969, after Mrs. Kennedy Sr. died. And then my sister-in-law sold it to the town for a modest sum, because she and her husband David wanted the town to benefit from this building. So they parted with it. But for almost 60 years, the Kennedy family lived there. And Carolyn Kennedy Tyson has written some wonderful letters and articles about the the house and her experiences there. And I think they're in your library. And so you have all that wonderful material. But the Kennedys themselves kind of repeated the hospitality and warmth and fine foods that was started in the 1860s. Because it was always a tradition in Second House, which was a shepherd's house, to take in people and feed them and board them and so forth. So it was very much a tradition that they carried on without realizing it. They had a garden, small garden, and I never had such wonderful food, especially because it was during World War II, and we were really limited. And my favorite meal was the Friday night meal that they would provide, which was baby corn, just plucked from the garden, potatoes which weren't grown in their garden, but were very special to Long Island, as you all know. And then they get a flounder, cooked just so. And Gertrude, their wonderful cook, she would make either coconut pie or floating island. Floating island was their specialty. Floating island was a boiled custard made with eggs and milk and stirred just so, not too much and not overcooked, or else you got scrambled eggs. And then on top of it, you beat egg whites, so it made literally an island. And then you put that in a hot oven, and that would be browned a bit, and that was a floating island. I never had that before. So Montauk was just a dream place for me. I was completely captivated by it from the very beginning. And I was very happy when we finally decided that we would buy this land over here, which we bought from, what was her name? Mrs. It was when guests came, yeah, we had to move out. Yeah. You have a good memory.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about when you would have to leave the second house occasionally.
Yeah, Jimmy and I were welcome guests in June, but when the big important guests came in July, we had to seek other places to stay. And sometimes we stayed at the Umbrella Inn, which is just down at the end of Old Montauk Highway as you merge with the new Montauk Highway. And I believe that beach is still called the Umbrella Beach after the Umbrella Inn. They had a little luncheonette stand out front, no doubt with an umbrella over it, and they had a couple of rooms upstairs. So the classic place for the guests at Second House, who were bumped down, as we always said, was to stay at the Umbrella Inn. And we didn't do that too much because we rented rooms then from a friend of the Kennedys called Florence Weiss, and she dabbled in the real estate business. So one day Jimmy and I came down for breakfast. She gave us breakfast there, very nice person. And there was a widow sitting there crying, and so Florence said, "Oh, this is Rosalie Baldwin, and she has a piece of land to sell. Would you like to see it?" And I said, "Well, you know, Jimmy, it's the middle of the war. I mean, do we want to buy land now?" He said, "Yeah, we're going to look at it." So luckily he paid no attention to me, and he came over here where we sit now, and he bought this land from Rosalie Baldwin. And her husband was Robert Baldwin, and he had bought this land from Benson. So in effect, the land has only changed hands from the Indians to Benson to Baldwin to the Abbeys. And we've had it now for roughly almost 60 years, 55 years. And then we built our house. We came in and looked at the land and said, "That's it." You know? And then it was the middle of World War II, and you could not build anything. You couldn't use any new lumber. You could only build a house the size of a two-car garage, which is roughly 16 feet by 20 feet. And that's where you sit right now, is the living room, which is right here, is 16 by 20 feet. And our builder was Ed Poswisel's father. He's the real estate dealer now, who's very prominent in Montauk. And his father was also Eddie we called him. And he built everything that you see here as you would if you were a cabinet maker or a shipbuilder. He took everything. Jimmy would make a drawing of something like the scroll on here or the frame on the painting, and Eddie would take it to his shop, and then he'd come back and install it. So we're very lucky to find such a fine builder, and we certainly enjoyed the experience of working with him. And I don't know if you feel it now, but this house is very snug. It's
dry.
It's been through lots of storms. It resists the dampness. I mean, it will get damp and moldy in a heavy fog, but it's a very cozy house, and we've enjoyed it so much. And the light is wonderful, and there's always something happening out the window. Looking out the window is like watching a movie. So we've had ever so much fun here. And,
where did you get the lumber during the war to build this?
Well, there was scrap lumber everywhere. Some of the boards in here, which are cedar, were stored in the attic at second house. And the Kennedys must have either sold it to us or given it to us.
So it's old.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
And the beams?
The beams came from the Dominy house on down Main Street, down where Citarella is now. Across from Citarella, there was a original Dominy house, and they were just taking it down, you can imagine. And so the beams were available.
So they are very old, those beams.
I would think so, yeah. Whatever, I suppose, late 17th century, or late 18th century, 1700s.
They're very beautiful.
Yeah. But the story of Second House, in a way, was, as I say, I think the Kennedys really preserved it during, the hard years of the Depression and so forth. They kept it together and kept mended. But just when we were about to build this, Mrs. Kennedy was planning to raise the barn. I mean, that is, not raise it, but get rid of it. She thought it was unsightly. And so Jimmy said, Claire, he called her. He said, could I buy it from you? And I'd move it down to my new land, and I'd make that my house. So everyone thought it over, and they said, well, if Jimmy Abbe wants it, it must be valuable. So in a certain sense, unwittingly, we saved the barn for the future. So I always took credit for that. But we didn't get our barn, because that would have been ideal. All we had to do was just gradually move in and install things. But when we first had this house, it was rather primitive. We had no electricity. We had kerosene lamps on this table here, one of which is still out in the other guest house, and then we had no telephone, and we had to get our water from a pump at the beach. There was no running water up here.
Right down here?
Yeah, right down there. We still get our water from the beach.
Is there still a pump down there? Or
yeah, there's an electric pump in the bathhouse. Yeah. And it's very, very good water. It's delicious water. We've had it tested. It's the well is 18 feet below the sand. So by the time you get the water, there's no salt in it. In fact, it must be from the
Apple. Do you have a photo of your house being built?
What?
Do you have a photograph of your house being built?
I do somewhere, yeah. Here's the photograph of Franny and me, our first moment in Montauk with the famous lighthouse. And because this is 1942, you'll see there's no big a tower in there, which they had to have later for the war years.
You're identical twins.
Yeah, we are. And this is a second house. I will show you that now. That's a photograph of second house, probably 1960. I don't have a date on that.
Mm-hmm.
But these are from negatives that I found at second house when Mrs. Kennedy owned it. And I was poking around one day looking in their wood bin. And in the bottom of the wood bin were all these negatives. So I said, "Dearest," which was her nickname. I said, "Dearest, oh, let me have those. They're precious." So I printed these and was able to give them to the library. Second house itself has a couple on the wall. And this is, in this photograph, is David Kennedy and Carolyn Kennedy Tyson. I would say that was about 1910, this picture. And it shows with their nurse, I think it was after they bought the house. It's their nurse Annie and their horse. And that's also in the collection.
There's tremendous visibility out there.
Yeah. Oh, well, there were no buildings.
Right.
No buildings at all.
No trees, no
Yeah.
bushes.
Yeah. In fact, when I first came to Montauk, first photograph I made of in the fields, a second house of somebody or other, one of my friends, the first building is Marshall's garage. Yeah. And across the street, there were a couple little buildings. I think Jake Wells had a little store there, maybe. And of course, Carl Fisher buildings were there at that
Mhm.
time, because they went up in 1927. But here's our house in the 40s.
And that's the Coast Guard station? In the back?
What?
The Coast Guard station?
Yeah, that's the Coast Guard station.
Tell us about the Coast Guard
Well,
station.
the Coast Guard station was a lookout for sailors and, wrecks.
I'm sorry, could you pull that away from you? You're rubbing the mic with it.
Oh.
That's fine. That's good.
Shall I start over?
Yeah, just about the Coast Guard
Oh,
station. Yeah.
When we first had our house here, there was a Coast Guard station, which I thought was very fanciful and very intriguing, which was just where the overlook parking lot is now. And it was fenced in, and during World War II, they kept guard dogs there, and they had the Coast Guard officers patrolling with rifles. And we were told not to go to the beach after sundown. If they saw a shadow of someone in the fog, or if they saw a shadow against the water, they would shoot, because we had just had the scare of the German submarine landing the officers in Amagansett. And of course they got on the train at Amagansett and went as far as Chicago before they were captured. So it and also we had to have black curtains over the windows that faced the ocean, because the German subs would sit out there a certain number of miles, I don't know, maybe 20 miles. And when they saw your room light dim, they would send a torpedo, because that meant a ship had passed between your light and their boat. So it was, we had some feeling of combating the war, but nothing dangerous. Here's another view of the Coast Guard station.
Did you get to know any of the people that...
We never met anyone at the Coast Guard station, no. They were fairly young fellows. I don't remember even talking to them, except we were warned not to. So I certainly wouldn't go near the dogs. This is our house under construction.
How long did it take you to build your house, to be habitable?
Oh, I guess most of the summer, probably the spring part of the summer. And this is a kite, a weather kite. Oh, of course. Wait, I might as well take this.
Yeah.
Take advantage. Is everything going all right?
It's beautiful. It's great. Sounds great. Looks good. And is very interesting.
Well, I tried to, cover different things than your other people because they all knew about the fishing and the rum running. Are you ready?
Yeah.
And then one day, this is actually during the war, maybe toward the end of the war, we found a weather kite on the beach. And it was in a heap on the beach, so we spent really most of a day trying to put it together and hoping we could make it fly. But it didn't fly, but it was quite a sizable object. And how it was used, I never did find out. But once again, we always, rescued things from the sea if they looked intriguing, barrels and tables. And there were much more records in, former years. We find bits of airplanes and, fighter planes and wrecks, tables, chairs, all kinds of items. But everything seems so tidy now. It's all plastic, I guess. This is the car that we had during World War II. It's a Model A Ford. Okay, and we used to leave it at the Montauk station. We could take the train, and we just leave this little open car at the station all week, and we get out and put the key in, and away we go. But everything was so relaxed, and you could trust everybody. It was a very warm feeling out here during the war.
You leave your car open at the train station.
Oh, and this is Durier's over here. Durier's Ice House.
Hasn't changed much. And you used to go there to get ice?
Yeah, we had to get ice from Durier's.
For your refrigerator?
Yeah, for ice box.
Oh.
Not refrigerator.
Oh, ice
when you
box.
don't have electricity, you have an ice box.
Oh.
This is Hurricane Carol, which was an event that was quite memorable, which I witnessed right from this room, from this window. And the hurricane started about 8:30 in the morning. And unlike today, where we get plenty of warning, we had absolutely no warning. I had my 3 kids here. They were 6, 4, and 2. And then the 6-year-old had a young friend from West Hampton visiting. So I had 4 kids and a summer helper. And Dora, the helper, said, Mrs. Abbe, that's quite a storm coming up now. I think I'll go down to the bathhouse and take out the bathing suits and the towels. I said, that would be great. She started to open the door. The door bent in her hand just like a soda cracker. So we both closed the door, nailed it shut, and we never got out again until the eye of the storm, until the lull. When a hurricane hits, first of all the wind and the rain and the force comes from the ocean side. And then in the middle of a storm, it's called the eye of the storm, there's a little lull. So you can get outside. Then it swings around 180 degrees, and that's when the hurricane hits the fishing village and the Sound, where it really does much more damage. We were safe here, relatively. And I will never forget that there was a man named William Smith who lived up on Washington Drive. And as a matter of fact, he was the man I met at the ice house. He used to go and get the ice and put it in the car for me. So he was a very kindly, very large, strong man. And he came over, about 11:30, right in the middle of the storm, and knocked on the back door, which I could open. And he said, Mrs. Abbe, he said, don't try to leave your house. Just stay here. You'll be perfectly safe. So I hung on. And in this room where we were sitting, there was at least 2 inches of water. And the water was just driving under the door. It wasn't coming through the windows, but it was coming under the door. And my 2-year-old, you don't know what to do with kids in a crisis. So he was splashing around in the water like it was a little swimming pool. So I decided, well, I'll take his picture. So I have a picture of Eli in here with kicking up the water and all the other kids cheering him on. So, I mean, that's what you do when there's a storm. It seems crazy. But then I went out. In the eye of the storm, I was able to open the door and go out. And I did take the picture, which you just saw, of the waves. And the waves were not beautiful, as you might think. They were rather like a laundromat, all this soapy, sandy water just boiling around. And the waves were breaking. Now, this cliff out here is 42 feet, and it's solid clay. But the waves were breaking, and the spray was breaking about halfway up. So it was a little bit intimidating. And then the next morning, after the storm is over, it's always beautiful. I mean, the weather clears immediately. And I looked out, I'd never seen clouds like that before. It was as if you passed a piece of Swiss cheese over the ocean. There were just all these holes shedding light over the ocean. It was so unusual. And then the next day, there's not a leaf on any bush or any tree. Everything turns black and smells horrible. It's all rotten.
Was this the middle of the summer?
It was August 28th, 1954, that the storm hit. And, there's very good documentation of it. That was Hurricane Carol. But anyway, Mr. Smith, who was so kind to me that day, he later was lost on the Texas Tower tragedy. And that happened in the winter, I think December of 1961. And the Texas Tower was part of a series of 3 radar stations. There was a warning system set up by the U.S. Army or Air Force, I don't know which, or, the defense outfit. And the towers were set on 3 legs and embedded in rock in the ocean. It was located about 100 miles southwest of Montauk Point, 38 miles due south of Fire Island Inlet. So it was fairly near, and the other 2 were over near New Jersey. That's it. Well, I don't know how to work it in. Let me see.
We're finishing up the radar tower anyway.
Okay.
You said it was 38 miles due south.
You're not shooting.
I'm rolling now, yeah.
Oh, you are? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's only tape.
The Texas Tower tragedy, as I said, just was a terrible thing. There were 28 men on board, and one of the legs broke. It was, I think, damaged by Hurricane Donna in 1961. And Mr. Smith, who lived up the road, he was sent out there. He was a diver. That was his profession. He had been diving. He helped to raise the Normandy, which was sunk in the Hudson River, or towed into the Hudson River after World War II. And so he was sent to make photographs of the base of it, and then he went back to help with the repairs because it was well documented that this leg was damaged. And the men knew that. There were, 28, there were 14 officers of the Army, and then there were 14 technicians, and they were all lost finally. They couldn't save them. The platform was on legs, but when the legs broke, the platform sunk.
And so was William Smythe.
He died in that, yeah. So that was a very sad event.
I was going to ask you about the swans.
Oh, the swan. One of my ambitions was always to photograph birds. And I'm not a bird photographer. I don't have the patience nor the fine equipment that most of the great ones have. But I used to pay my children a quarter apiece if they would spot the swans. The swans, 1 or 2 summers, they followed a certain pattern. Every afternoon about 4:30, they would fly directly over the water. I could look out and they were just eye level. They were so low. And of course they fly in a V-shaped formation, a ragged V. And they'd go down toward Fort Pond, and then they'd swing over and land on the pond. That was their home. And so they'd be out there, and they'd say, "Swans, swans!" But the swans flew so fast that, believe it, even if I had the camera on this table, I couldn't get out there between the time they told me. So I never got a picture of a swan. And I finally had to give up that idea because it was costing me money. But I did get a lovely picture of a heron. I got one shot of a heron in Little Reed Pond. So that had to do me for all time.
But there were a lot of swans, because there aren't that many now. I mean, it sounds like you're talking about 8 or 9.
Oh, yeah, there was a flight of 10 or 12,
Right.
yeah. There are not that many now. And they had this regular pattern. They just came every day.
You said you clocked them at 60 miles
Oh,
an
I
hour.
did. One time, I was right by Gurney's Inn, which I knew was 1 mile from my house. Because I gave people directions 1 mile after Gurney's, look for this driveway. And so I followed them along, and I realized I was doing 65 miles an hour. That's hardly a scientific measure, but it was a rough measure.
What was your social life like?
Oh, there was always something to do in Montauk. In fact, after the Hurricane Carol, in order to let off steam and get the kids, to feel everything's going to be okay, I got them all cleaned up and dressed up, not really dressed up, but just dressed up a little bit, and walked down to the second house to see if they were okay. And we did that. That, used up some energy and seemed like fun for them. And when we got down there, the waves were breaking over from the ocean, over the road, and landing in Fort Pond.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we went to the second house, and I'm sure Mrs. Kennedy gave them cookies or lemonade or something. So it was a quiet social life. We did have picnics. We used to go and have picnics at what we called Oyster Pond, which is way over on the beach. Right here. That's a picnic I gave on a 4th of July, 1950. And there are 25 people there. And we had to get the key from the third house from the ranch, Deep Hollow Ranch. And they gave you a key, and you drove up Big Reed Pass and down the hill there. And we went in that Ford station wagon that you just saw, because a low-slung car wouldn't make it. It scraped the bottom. And we took lobster salad, as I remember, and another woman who had a little luncheon down in Napeague, she made 50 lemon tarts for the party. Wow. And she said, never again. But we had such a good time. We used to have picnics almost every Saturday that was good, until Jimmy went in the antique business. Jimmy switched to the antique business in 1961. He dropped photography completely and decided he wanted to be an antique dealer, which was a very wise decision because he just loved it. And we had a shop in East Hampton, and he also bought a building in Oyster Bay. That was his main base. But all summer he'd have a shop in East Hampton.
What was it called?
James Abbe. He always used his own name. He thought that was better than tricky things like the old country shop. He figured the name was well known, and so he would use it. Mm-hmm. And so then we couldn't have picnics anymore because he would work until about 6 o'clock, he gets stuck in the shop, talking with somebody or wrapped up in some project. And so that was the end of picnics for the moment. People do have them now, but not like the olden style where we had large groups and lemon tarts.
Was it an all-day affair?
No, we'd go out the end of the day when it was cooling off, and we could have a big fire, and sometimes you'd swim in the Sound. The oyster pond is here, and the Sound is right along here.
Did you get oysters out of the pond?
I never heard of them.
No.
But I'm sure if it's named Oyster Pond, somebody must have had it.
Tell us about this woman here.
Oh, that's Princess Pocahontas. I photographed her in East Hampton in 1960. And she was the last Montauk Indian born on the reservation here in Montauk. After that, I think the Montauk Indians gravitated toward East Hampton or Sag Harbor. And there's still some living there. And the reservation seems to have been all over. They had one campsite, and there weren't too many Montauk Indians. Maybe there were, between 20 and 35, even at the beginning of 1800. See, they were wiped out by the flu and the cold that the settlers, Europeans, brought. They weren't used to that. So they just got decimated by it. And so there were two camps somewhere, and then their graveyard is up near the Montauk Manor. And I think that's a protected site. There's an Indian graveyard up there.
Where did you meet her?
I don't know, someone must have come into the store and told Jimmy about it, because he had just started the antique shop at East End. We both went. He did color pictures, and I did the black and white. And she was a very gracious, very regal lady. She had a certain calm, regal manner. But in order to make money, she worked as an attendant in the ladies' room in the Long Island Telephone Company in Riverhead. So it wasn't exactly like she was treated royally. And she gave us, she sold us these little birch scrubbies. They were about so long. And she'd go out in the woods, and she'd cut up a birch branch of a certain width, and then she'd take a penknife and she'd peel it, and then she'd take it, chop, 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 chop. And she could make 2 a day. And she charged us $2 a piece. And then she put a little string around each one. And it worked. But I don't use it, I just keep it as an artifact.
I'd love to see them. They sound very...
So there was plenty to do in Montauk. There's always something to see.
And you played croquet?
I think, well, I'll do that later. What I want to tell you about is the deer that I rescued, because that was another 4th of July. Everything seems to happen to us on the 4th of July. I should be careful. But one year we were having a very large picnic lunch on the beach right in front of our house. And I was up in the house here fixing lunch. And Jimmy's half-brother from California, from Sacramento, was here visiting. And his wife had a good friend who owned the stone house up on the cliffs in Montauk. So they were guests there, and they brought all those guests and their friends. I would say 15 people were on the beach. And so suddenly someone called up to me and said, well, I hear all this commotion out there. And then they called up and they said, call the Coast Guard. But oh my gosh, I looked out and there was a little black arrow like this floating along, swimming along. Oh my gosh, that's a shark. I call the Coast Guard. They come down very quickly, 2 guys, burly and in a truck, each carrying a rifle. And by that time, I had discovered, someone else came up and told me, ran up and said, oh, it's a deer. We're trying to get the deer out of the water. So the Coast Guard gets here, the two guys. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, it's a deer. I thought they were going to shoot me. They didn't care one bit about rescuing the deer. They just turned her and went around and they left. But everybody got together. Richard Abbe, my husband's brother, was a very good swimmer, and all his friends were good swimmers. So they went down and dove in the water, about 10 people, I think. And they swam out and encircled the deer. And then my sister, who was down there, was used to handling crowds from all her photography experiences. She stood up and held the crowds back, because what had been happening, the deer would start to swim in, and then all the crowds that were on the beach here would run down to take pictures of the deer, you know. And he'd go out again. He wouldn't come out of the water. So she went up and she said, stand back until they get the deer out of the water. And so they worked out this idea, and they enclosed the deer with their swimming, and he just, you know, just came in and staggered up on the beach. And my daughter was here, so she went down and put a towel down, and got him on the towel, and someone helped her drag the deer up to the dunes. And in about 20 minutes, he stood up. He was a baby, a fawn, and he ran into the woods.
Wow.
So he was saved.
And you told us that the beach was very crowded because you used to be able to park there to go
Yeah,
swim.
it was very, very crowded. We used to have to go down Sunday morning and put an umbrella and our bath beach towels there in order to save a little piece for ourselves. But that was because at that time, the people could park there all day. And of course, it was very desirable. Now they can only park for the last 8 or 9 years for 2 hours, which makes it more available. But and the beach is crowded on weekends, but not unlike the old days. This weekend, just for fun, we counted 14 people on the beach in front that we could see. You know, that was all. I was surprised. That may be the least number of people I've seen here in many years for Labor Day.
They were all at Ditch Plains.
I bet.
Hundreds and hundreds and
Really?
hundreds, cars parked everywhere.
Can I hit?
Yeah.
Surfing is really taken over, though, from the 60s. You know, when you're talking about surfing was not such a big deal as it is
No.
now.
What? I can't.
Surfing.
Oh, surfing. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it has
So they
really.
go there as opposed to...
For the conclusion.
That's everything, pretty much.
Yeah.
Except croquet.
Okay.
I'm rolling.
All right. I'm stretching. Jimmy and I always loved houses, and we would go exploring. When people asked, what do you do in Montauk, there was always so much to do. We'd say, oh, let's go look at this, let's go look at that. And Jimmy Tyson, who was Carolyn Tyson's husband, somehow knew the Aubert. The Auberts had a house on Star Island, a wonderful house. It was built by Mrs. Aubert's brother, Caleb Bragg, and Caleb Bragg was a millionaire sportsman. He was a race car driver and a speedboat driver. And I think also he had a plane. So it must have been plenty of money in the background. I don't know where it came from, but he was a very well-known person out here. And he built this house about 1928, right at the beginning of the Fisher era. Carl Fisher, as everybody knows in Montauk, really planned Montauk in 1927, bought land and planned this large complex which was to be the Miami of the North. So I think Caleb Bragg came with that wave of people. And the house was located on Star Island a complex of 7 houses, and they were white stucco with bright green, shiny tile roofs. And luckily, they're still standing, but they're not as dramatic now as they were when they were owned by the Aubert Bragg family. Because Caleb Bragg must have had wonderful taste. They were built in a sort of a Art Deco international style, and furnished completely with wonderful Art Deco style furniture. The living room furniture came off the Ile-de-France. It was very heavy and very geometric, heavy iron or steel, glass tops. And there was a playhouse. There were 7 buildings. Oh, and the reason that we got there was because there were 2 gatehouses, and we had friends. We met at Second House, friends of the Kennedys, who rented the gatehouse. And so we would go over there and play croquet with them, and the croquet lawn was just flat like a golf green. Beautiful. And they had the croquet set that was made of lignum vitae, and it was steel bands around it and heavy mallets. And when you hit the ball, it would go about 100 yards. And we played croquet there. Croquet was one of our very special enthusiasms. And we played very seriously. I mean, not that we competed, but we took every stroke, and each person really wanted to win. So we played croquet there, and then we also played croquet at Second House. But Second House had a very rolling lawn, and it was mowed nicely, but it all up and down, and you had to calculate exactly where the slope would take you and not go over the edge. So we had that kind of fun. And then at the Caleb Bragg, Carl Fisher planned a race course as part of his complex out near the golf club. And Caleb Bragg must have been in on that, because I have seen a photograph of Caleb Bragg handing the cup to the winner. There were 2 Montauk Grand Prix, one in 39 and one in 40. They were also held toward the end of summer. And the race course started at the golf course, the golf club, and then circled around Fairview Avenue, Greenwich Avenue, Gloucester, and circled around in front of the manor. And the course was 10 miles long, and they went around, let's see, I guess how many times? 10 miles. It was about a 60-mile course. It was a 2-mile course, and they went around 10 times. So it was about 60 miles, 2.5 miles, and 60 miles altogether. So it was quite an innovation for Montauk. They have a Grand Prix race, well publicized. About 1,000 spectators would come, which is not like surfing today or an event today, like a rock concert, but for those days it was really quite an event. And Montauk always intrigued me. We just loved it. And I didn't realize when I went around taking all these snapshots of hurricanes and picnics and the downtown and the Carl Fisher half-timber buildings that I was capturing things that were going to disappear eventually. So I just did it because I liked doing it.
Well, you remarked, though, that Montauk has changed less than you might imagine.
Yeah, I would think so, because, this is just my observation of old Montauk Highway. When I look out the window here toward the village, I see some of the same buildings. Now, there are a couple of little motels, but nothing dramatic, such as would happen in Miami or even California. But Montauk has a very short season, which is probably what happened to Carl Fisher, in addition to the crash, he just, phased out. He had a very bad hurricane experience in Miami, and that wiped him out. And I had read in one of your books here that although he was a billionaire, when he died he only had $40,000 left. So he really did get wiped out by the crash. But Montauk is a special place, and of course its fruits and flowers and all of the bounty struck me from the very beginning. It's a precious place. I hope it stays that way. That's it.
Stay inside. Yeah, that's very nice.
Okay.
Yeah, hold on one second.
It's a good light.
Very nice. Thanks.